to the Be My Guest podcast, where we interview inspiring entrepreneurs who share their stories and their insights and much, much more. You made a great choice tuning in today to the Be My Guest podcast. Welcome and enjoy the show. Welcome, everybody. We're doing another podcast episode of Be My Guest. We have another great guest today. I want you guys to learn about and get her story. I am not going to delay, but don't forget, if you want to be interviewed on our podcast, go to BeMyGuestPodcast.com, BeMyGuestPodcast.com, and sign up to be interviewed. We'd love to hear your story, your insights as well. Without further ado, let me bring on Jennifer, my guest today. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, and looking forward to learning more about what you do and how long you've been doing it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Now, Jennifer, you told me on the pre-interview here that you're basically calling in from Dallas, Texas, that area, right? Is that right?
Yeah. The Fort Worth side of things, the cooler side of things, gotcha. The laid back side of things. So yeah.
Okay. I didn't know there was a difference, but now I'm learning that. So that's awesome. How long have you been in that area? You've been in there. I think you told me you did live in Florida. This is where I'm at for a while, but how long have you been living in the Fort Worth area?
So I've been living back in Texas for about 7.5, almost 8 years. I was a military veteran, and so that took me everywhere else for a while, and I've practiced in several different states, but I'm back in Texas because this is home. So yeah. I'm back here.
Well, thank you for your service, by the way. And so you're back here to Texas. I didn't mention this, but I'll mention this now. I did have a small stint living in the Rio Valley area, which they called it North Mexico, basically back when I lived there. I did stay there for, I think it was like 6 or 7 months, and because of family stuff, I had to move back to Florida. But so I was a Texan for 6 months or so. So I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. So anyways, Let me get down to the story of you and what you do. If you could take a minute, introduce yourself, what you do, and basically maybe give us a little bit of insight of how you got started doing what you do.
Gosh. Okay. So my name is Jennifer, and I've been a mental health therapist for almost 20 years. In doing so, I've mostly worked with corporate agencies and only recently stepped out into entrepreneurship. So it's been a wild ride. Like I mentioned, I'm a veteran, and so I've always worked really closely with military and members and their families. And that's something I continue to do. It's a passion of mine. Being a military member, it's really hard to find decent providers because some of the restrictions in the insurance and stuff. But and so I live close to the Fort Worth base out here, the JRB, and so I service a good chunk of those veterans and their families.
Awesome.
I added in financial coaching because as a longtime therapist, I was having so many conversations with people about the stress of their money, and I was like, well, let's do something about that. So that's what I added in about a couple of years ago.
So I didn't catch that in the pre-interview, but it sounds like you're a therapist and a financial coach. How did you come up with those two things? I know you said you're finding the more and more you talk with people, work with people, that they needed that. I'm kind of assuming that means that finances could lead to a lot of stress. I shouldn't assume. I guess I should know that too. But
how often have you talked about money?
Oh, well, how long do you have here? Okay, I don't know how long you have.
So this is your show, but
yeah. So is that the main reason? Because when you were working with people, they had a lot of stress and anxiety about the whole financial part of their life?
Yeah, so that's why I decided to get some training, some formal training in financial coaching. I've always been decent with numbers, and they made sense. And we as just kind of a society place a lot of emotional components on money when we don't actually need to. And so some of the conversations that I was having for many, many years revolved around the inability or maybe even unwillingness to manage the behaviors around money. And so I wanted to kind of marry those two components because so many people struggle with that. And I mean, as our society continues today, we see this ever growing debt, of home after home after home. And I wanted to be able to help to change that.
I don't think I've ever met someone who does what you do as a combination, but it makes total sense. I mean,
Thought
you
so
know,
too.
I think, is it still the same stat as it used to be? The number one thing that killed, I shouldn't say killed, but divorce was because of financial stress and that kind of thing. Is that still true today? I'm not up on that stat, but it sounds like it.
So I'm a statistician, I am not, but it is one of the main characteristics of a faulty relationship is the misunderstanding and misalignment of money management.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
so interesting that you just decided, hey, I think I need to get more skills in this area so I can serve my current clients better. Not a lot of people do that, especially when it's like almost a left turn based on what you're doing already. But it sounds like you did that. And what was? And I know you can't name names or anything like that, but what have you seen? Like maybe even a severe story you could share if you can, of how financial stress, how it's affected people. I mean, what are you seeing out there based on that decision
So
of doing that?
yeah, a couple of years ago, I was working with a couple, and it was glaringly obvious to me that both of them came from very different backgrounds in relation to how they manage behaviors, money, anger, really everything. So they came to me for marriage counseling, and they were wanting to get married, and so they and when I talked with them about the various topics that go into getting married, so money management, household management, children, if that's a thing, pet care, elder care, just all of the varieties of things that go into combining two lives together. Their money situation was off the chain,
Mm,
out of sorts, just completely eroded. And I thought, if I had a little bit more education in this particular area, I could really, well, I don't know that I would have been able to help this particular couple, but I could really have made it a little bit more clear the financial aspects that were just really driving them into the ground.
mm. Now, being an entrepreneur as long as I've been, I don't know if I've lasted as an employee more than a minute. So I had really no choice because I wasn't really hireable. That's more of choice than anything. But you see a lot of books out there about the psychology of money and how we think of money or the mindset behind money. I'm sure you probably have read a book or two, maybe on it, maybe you haven't. I don't know. But
Yeah, there's a bookcase over there. There's lots of
okay,
books
all right.
about how
So
to
so
do it.
okay, so you probably read a few of those. Um, is it true that it has a psychological effect or an element that maybe we didn't, or at least we didn't for a long time think about how it impacts us as far as how we treat money and our relationship with money? Is that true?
Absolutely. So much like we learn how to have relationships with people, we learn how to have relationships with money. Where did we learn that? If mom or dad were erroneous spenders and just bought, kind of whatever to make them feel better, we'll learn and take up that behavior. And if we, as growing adults, when we get our first job, go and spend everything instead of figuring out and looking a little bit beyond the nose on our face, we're going to keep up that behavior unless we choose to change that. And much like, any other habit that we grow, our habits with money are really behavior dependent.
Mm,
Because if we choose to start a health regimen, right, there has to be a decisive moment where you make shifts and changes in your behavior.
yeah.
If you're wanting to be well with money, there has to be a decisive moment where you change the behavior around money. And so it's absolutely true. We as a society put a lot of emotions, either good, bad, or indifferent, on money.
Yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, for a lot of things that we end up becoming or doing, or the behaviors, like you said, we pick up from our parents and our life as we grow up, and including money. Is there hope for someone who really struggles with maybe putting money in the right places and really accumulating wealth and having that compound effect, or starting a business and really, investing in their talents or skills? Is there hope for someone who has an emotional tie negatively because they got it from their parents or saw the behavior, to break out of that?
So you're asking an optimist. Yes, there's hope. Yes, there's hope. It is a decisive point in time where a person says, I need to do things differently, and I'm dedicated to do that.
Yeah.
So if a person can see beyond their current circumstances to that brighter side of the road, absolutely there's hope
Yeah. Now,
if they make the changes.
now, if you were to kind of give me a ratio of the clients you work with or the clients you talk to that potentially need your services, is it more of those who are being proactive and being smart, using wisdom because they know they need to do this, or is it the pain of not doing it or being careless with their money that motivates them? What's the ratio of the clients doing one or the other, based
So
on
I'm
your?
going to change that just a little bit because, based on my opinion, my professional opinion, the amount of clients who need the services are not participating in the services.
Yeah.
But the ratio of clients who come into the services solely based on, I need to figure out what I'm doing, I need to figure out how to budget, I don't know what I'm doing, where do I start? And and then kind of, I guess your question was the behavioral aspect or the mechanical aspect. There's not a great ratio because
Mhm.
90% of the time it is both, and they're
Yeah.
they're super entwined together.
Yeah.
Um, I've only ever had probably two or three clients. It was solely mechanical, and when I say mechanical, it was figuring out how to do the math well.
Okay.
Period.
So they had the motivation and desire. They just didn't
Absolutely.
have some of the formula right, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, man, with all the books out there, because there's a lot of good content. I don't know if all of it's good, but most of the ones I've read about shifting your mindset and relationship with money seems to be fairly good, fairly good examples of concepts and things that from experience people have shared, and all the content that's being put out there. How does someone like you tackle that question? How do you take people who really need this, who are not tapping into this service, and get them to actually want this and be motivated? How do you do that? I mean, is that the $1 million question? If you can answer it, you're going to be set for life, kind of deal, or what is
Well,
that?
I'd love to think so. However, I think the $1 million question would be, what would make someone so ready to make that shift and change? Like, what is the thing that gets them to flip their own switch?
Yeah,
If I had an answer to that, I probably would, retire a lot sooner. Um,
yeah,
but in relation to, kind of what gets people there, I mean, what makes change happen regardless? We get sick and tired of being in the position that we're in
mm, yeah,
enough to make a shift.
yeah,
And that's the same with money. A lot of people don't know the practicality and how to, meet the rubber to the road on making shifts and changes to their money and their finances because
yeah.
we're habitual creatures.
Right. Let me ask you this: are you one of those financial coaches that's more of a wizard with finances, where someone looks at their quote unquote budget, which, by the way, that's a trigger word for me. I know I'm talking to a therapist too, but I can't stand the word budget because it feels limited and it feels. I'm telling on myself right now. Look what a therapist. You're a good therapist. You know how to get it out. So let's say someone has a budget and they see their income is less than their overhead, if you will. I'm using a business term. um, how can someone work with you and you show them how to put money in other places or invest it or whatever when they don't even have enough money to do what they're doing right now?
So I use a word that most people don't like, and it's called the hustle.
Mm,
Sometimes if you don't make enough money, you got to do the hustle. And
mm,
I've been there, man. Like, I've had three jobs at one time. Let me tell you, I've walked through the suck. I've driven the struggle bus. I was
wow,
there.
that's
And
good.
it's not fun. And my kids will probably tell you, like, yeah, we never saw her. But it was what had to happen to get me through that particular struggle.
Yeah.
So the other part of that, and for many people, budget is a bad word, right? And I joke about it. I'm like, I'm gonna say a dirty word.
So I'm not alone.
Absolutely not. Absolutely
Look,
not.
I think
We
this interview should be done because I got enough insight already. I thought I was all by myself. My wife looks
no,
at me like, budget's not a bad word. We should have one. Okay, well, let's just call it something different. I agree we should have one. I just don't want to call it budget. It
the
just it's like
game plan,
it's like
right?
it's like the nails on the chalkboard for me, you know. But go
Right.
ahead. I like that game plan. I'm writing that
Yeah,
down.
it's
Hold on.
your financial game plan of the money that you work so hard for,
Yeah.
right? And so, as a coach, my role, much like a sports game, I'm not going to go out there and play the game for you, but I'm going to give you some strategies and some plays that you can do with your skills and what you have coming in to make the changes that you want to make to win the game of financial success.
Yeah. Was it intentional that you call yourself a financial coach versus like an advisor
Oh,
or
absolutely. I'm not
manager?
that cool. I didn't go to school for that. I'm not that cool. I'm going to tell you right now. Financial advisors and planners, they take risks that I don't.
Mm,
But I do other things. I pull down the behavioral aspects of navigating the hard things about money. That's what I do.
yeah. All right. Let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about the therapist side of you, right? Um, is that a situation where that's your own business, or you work at a place that already has the setup, and you're just one of the therapists? What's the landscape look like for that?
So I mentioned earlier that I worked corporate for a long time, and corporate mental health is you work for a company and they take a chunk of your income from whatever you make. Um, and I'll make a long story really short. The use of insurance inside corporate mental health um, is going sideways.
Mm,
So it is not something that my values continue to follow. And so I decided to go out on my own. And so I have an individual private practice where I do mental health therapy, and I
mm.
specialize in a few things. Um, but I also wanted to fold in the financial coaching, integrated in the same business.
Yeah.
So I'm a standalone. Mhm.
So you have your own practice. How long have you had that going?
7 months.
7 months, right? How's it? What's some of the challenges you faced? I mean, did you have some clients you took with you, or did you have to start from zero and build it up? What did that? How that look like?
So I had some clients who, excuse me, who decided to stop where I was working and found me again. So I didn't. I won't say that I brought them with me,
Right,
but they wanted to continue services with me.
right.
So
Well, that's good. At
um,
least you have some foundational clients to start with instead of having to start all over from zero.
yeah, I've been very, very blessed, and starting the business. One of the big challenges was getting on insurances again, and many private practitioners choose to opt out of taking insurance because of the challenges that lie in trying to become paneled and sticking to all of the regulations and all of the things that you have to do to stay
Yeah,
on an insurance panel. And then some of the reimbursement rates and things are not comparable to
yeah.
what they should be. But
A
I
lot
mean
of red
that's
tape, huh? Right, a lot of red tape.
red, purple, green, yellow tape. It's all over there. It's everywhere. So
So yeah, so let's talk to the entrepreneur side of you as a therapist or in the therapy business.
mhm.
What is that like to run a business where it sounds like you are the service, right, as well as the owner? What is
Yeah.
that like to juggle all that in trying to create clients and set appointments and be the therapist and do the follow up? And I mean, it sounds like that's probably where you're at. What is that like to do that?
Well, there's a lot of hats that I have to wear as an entrepreneur. And there's a mind shift that I had to have to be the entrepreneur, right? Again, coming from corporate, they did all the things. They did all the marketing. They did all of networking. They did all of the bringing clients in. Now I wear all of those hats. And
Mm,
sometimes the mental capacity I think is a little more than I can tolerate, but then I take a nap and I'm like, all right, I got this because I have to.
Yeah.
right? I want to make sure that I'm servicing my clients to the best of my ability. And that means that I have to go find them. I have to go find the right clients for me because I'm not everybody's therapist.
Right. Who would you
Um,
say is your ideal client?
oh, that's such a loaded question, man.
Okay.
And so it's my ideal client is someone who is absolutely willing to work on making their life better
Yeah.
and having a cheerleader alongside that's a little snarky and a little pushy,
Yeah.
um, but someone who is willing to say, I don't know what I'm doing, I need help, let's go.
Yeah. And you said you specialize in a few things. Is that the therapist, the therapy side of things that you specialize in, or the type of clients that you work with as far as specializing in? Which one is it?
So the therapy side of things is what I specialize in. I'm a trauma specialist, so that
Okay.
means that when someone has an event that causes a traumatic experience resulting in PTSD, that's something that I can help them with. And I also specialize in grief and loss,
Yeah.
um, depression and anxiety. Most clinicians do. Dabble in OCD, and then bipolar disorder. And so
Yeah.
those are some things that I've worked with for a very, very long time. When I
Okay.
say
Well, let's do something interesting here. And by all means, I'm not trying to extract free services from you, but those two things you mentioned, I think, are things that I've struggled with as well. Right now, for most people, when they hear the word PTSD, they relate it to someone in combat, which I'm sure, based on your background, you probably work with. But would you agree that PTSD can happen and occur in other ways other than people that were in war or battle?
absolutely. So the diagnostic criteria that comes with PTSD is that it's a recurring series of emotional responses and physiological responses based on a singular or series of events that are common.
Mm,
Like, right? And I'm not trying to quote the DSM, this is where we get our diagnostics, but PTSD can happen from a lot of different things. It's
right.
not solely combat related. You
Mm,
know, people who have traumatic childhoods, a car accident, a sudden loss of a job,
mm,
a sudden loss of a loved one,
yeah.
right? Those are traumatic events that can lead to PTSD diagnosis.
Well, back to let's try something here real quick. I'll be the client for a second, okay? And I'm going to give you my real life story. In 2019, I lost my multi-million dollar business. I tried to sell it, and the people I sold it to were in my business. They ruined it. And so I walked away from not only not making the money from selling it, but now everybody is gone and the business is gone. Then COVID happened. Of course, we all know generally what happened with COVID, with world being turned upside down. My wife was pregnant at the time, and she gave birth to our child. Um, and she was a micro preemie. My wife had preeclampsia, so she had to give birth at 23 weeks. So she was less than a pound old. She ended up living till 15 months, but passed away on Mother's Day on 2021. Right, so that was obviously a devastating thing for us to wake up that day. And although she was doing really well or better than what she was, obviously she didn't make it. So that was a huge event in our life, as you can probably imagine. Later on that year, well, actually the same week we found same week we found out later on that year I ended up.
I'm losing audio and I'm not really sure what's happening. So I'm reading your lips and I'm catching everything. I'm just not able to hear you.
I think it might have to do with the notification sound that just came through. Can you hear me
Okay,
okay now?
I got you. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so
I think it gains it back
yeah,
here once it goes through the audio thing. So sorry about that.
that's
Um,
okay. So
let
that
me
same week,
figure out.
she was pregnant again.
Yeah, yeah. She found out she was pregnant, and then later on that year, I got COVID and was put in the hospital for over 4 weeks. Almost died. Obviously, I didn't. I'm still here, and thank God for that. Um, and we went through our back and forth of whether we were going to stay together or what, because we had a lot of stuff going on. And and then We did have our daughter, obviously, our newest daughter, at the end of the 21 year. But subsequently, we lost our house. We went through a lot of stuff, and we were able to regain and put together a business and really put our footing together. And thanks be to God, we were able to stay together and actually recover from some of the things we were dealing with as a couple. But as you can imagine, I think I qualify as PTSD experience as well as loss and grief. What do you tell someone that thinks they're okay, which would be me, but also deals with sometimes because a lot of my attention was taking care of my wife, because she, not that I didn't go through it, but obviously I wanted to care for her and put a lot of attention on her, and she needed it because she carried the child and she cared for the child and all that, and it was tough, but here we are. What do you tell somebody that's been through that? Would those things qualify as some of those PTSD and trauma things that you talked about?
Absolutely. So there's, and not to provide you a diagnosis because I don't know you well enough. However, what you've been through was horrific. And for a guy that says he's okay, my first words would be, it's okay if you're not. It's okay that if one day you're like, nope, everybody can kick rocks.
Yeah.
That'd be okay.
Yeah, and I've definitely had those days. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got a good support system, and they've been very, hey, if you need to vent. But I said, this is why I said all that, not just to put my business out there. Most people, I share my story pretty freely because of being able to overcome, not completely, of course, but like being able to move forward. I would use that term, and encouraging others to do the same thing, right? Being through huge events like that. But I said all this to say, it's taken me almost 3 years to have the energy and or the motivation to do some of the same things I used to do, I would say pretty easily before, right? Like for example, when you start a business from scratch and you're able to grow it like we did, the one we tried to sell and it didn't work out. I mean, we grew that business to multi-million dollars. It was doing well. It was a home improvement installation company and was doing really well and made more money than I've ever made in my life. So, and I started that from zero, like no investments, no partners, no nothing. And, you think my mind is like, well, let me just do it again because obviously I need to, provide for my family. And I also want to do that. But it has been over the last 3 years, it's been a struggle to do some of the, I guess you would call quote unquote hard work that you have to do in the beginning. I don't know. And I don't know if this is because I've done it before and I don't want necessarily to do it again, or it's because of the fear of what happened before or what. So I don't know what that is. So sorry, I told you I told you I was gonna give you 80% of the floor, and here I am taking up more than 50%. So, but I feel like this is just a good conversation to have with someone who has some real answers here. But what do you think?
So, kind of first and foremost, most men wouldn't admit that they're not okay, and that's typical, right? Biologically, internally, you have a role to protect and provide for your family. And in those moments where you couldn't, life was just kicking your ass. You couldn't do anything else about it. And so that likely caused maybe some depression, which kind of is an underlying current to a lot of where people find that they're unmotivated or unable, maybe even unwilling to start something that they've done before because what's the point? It didn't work the first time, or life molded me over the first time. So what's the point? And so in reference to kind of the history that you've given thus far, and I appreciate you trusting me with that information. Sometimes that underlying current that goes in there that restricts your want to or desire is really depression. Now, I'm not saying that PTSD is not in there sprinkled in somewhere, because you've got a lot of stuff going on. And I really hope that, I'm glad that you have a good support system, but being able to process that would be really important as well.
Yeah.
And I hope that you work with someone. So in reference to kind of the getting through really hard things to find your motivation again, to get back up, You'd have to have the confidence that if it doesn't work out, it'll still be okay.
Hmm.
And a lot of people have a hard time doing that once the world is just kind of knocking on their butts.
Right. And you see a lot of, especially in the entrepreneur space, you see a lot of this um, fear of failure being
Absolutely.
one of the elements that people talk about, right? But let me ask you this from a therapist standpoint. How much of it, because I think the misconception is that you have to get rid of that in order to really be successful. My opinion, and then you tell me if you feel different. I'm not a therapist, but you are. My opinion is you don't get rid of the fear of failure. You just know how to. Uh, I don't know about the right words here, but you know how to work with it or work through it or deal with it in a way where you understand it's there, but it's not something that's necessarily going to be the reality, but it definitely is there. So, in my opinion, and I tell people this, you can't get rid of it because it's going to be there. There's some, in my experience, there's some good fear. Like, hey, don't run out in the middle of the street, you might die. Don't jump out of a plane without a parachute, that kind of thing. Those are fears that are actually healthy because it keeps us alive. But this common word being used a lot, especially when people are talking about entrepreneurship or starting a business or, whatever, is like, fear of failure. How do you deal with that kind of stuff?
So I had the fear of failure, and I had to understand how to harness it because what I
Harness.
was
I like
doing
that.
in corporate was not aligning with my values. And so I desperately needed to kind of rearrange my moral, you know, fortitude to get through and make the plan happen.
Mm,
Now, were there nights that my fear overwhelmed me? Absolutely. Absolutely.
mm,
Were there days where I told, my coworker, it's not my coworker, she's my office mate. I told her that I don't know if I'm going to make it.
mm,
Yeah, because the fear is big, right? But if we understand that overcoming a fear is creating a plan to navigate through it, we can harness the energy from the fear and utilize it because it's not just going to dissipate. It's not going to go away.
yeah.
And even
Yeah.
those who are running multi-million-dollar companies have this little inkling of we got to keep going.
Mm,
We can't be stagnant.
right. 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 Now you were talking about your transition from corporate to starting your own practice. Um, from the time you first thought of doing that to actually you did it, what was the time gap between that?
A year.
Yeah. Okay. And how did you deal with that, being that the unknowns of, is this going to work, or am I going to be able to take care of everything and do it on my own? Like, what
I
was the way you navigated?
I read and researched every possibility that I could fall over on my face and navigated a plan to work around it.
Yeah.
I dug in and watched videos and learned about and interviewed other clinicians who had done the same thing.
Mm, mm. Now, let me ask you a question. What do you tell the people that do that too much, and they're just using it like they're a perfectionist before they want to actually take the leap? How do you balance that, right? Where it's like, okay, well, uh, you can't cover every scenario because there's some scenarios that haven't been written about, haven't been experienced. So, if you think you're going to be, do it after that, that's just not realistic. How do you balance that out?
Well, as much as I'm an optimist, I'm also a realist. And so I point blank ask people, how's that working out for you?
Mm,
Are you in your own way? Is your fear of not being perfect keeping you from just starting?
right.
And most of the time, they're like, yeah.
Yeah.
They don't like hearing that. I didn't like hearing that,
Mm,
and it took somebody telling me like, just start.
yeah.
So that first step is super scary, and we can relate it back to the first of anything. We don't know what we're doing, and that's okay. We're not reinventing the wheel.
Right.
We're not starting something that nobody's ever done before.
Yeah.
If
So
you're
good.
willing to learn
Yeah.
from other people's mistakes, you can really grow yourself without having to make those same mistakes.
Yeah. So what's the vision of your practice? I mean, are you wanting to kind of just be a solo therapist, or are you going to grow it to other therapists work with you and build a practice together? What's kind of like the vision going forward?
My vision right now as a solo practitioner, I really enjoy the opportunity to kind of network with other therapists and get some really great ideas and lean into that support system.
Mm.
I haven't dreamed beyond the solo practitioner, and I have a baby company, and so um, I think that there's a possibility to maybe one day supervise and help other new clinicians grow their practice or grow into learning about the field. I love when I get other clinicians as clients because they're like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And I'm like, "I don't
Hmm.
know."
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
And right now, it's I'm flying solo, and that's filling my heart.
yeah. Now, the financial coach side of things, is everyone kind of get both, or is it separate clients, or it can be separate clients, or are you looking for clients for that separately, or how do you do that?
So when I shop around for clients, I'm asking what does a client need, right? Because
Mhm.
not everybody who is coming in is having financial challenges.
Right.
I ask those questions because I'm nosy, um, but sometimes it's just a behavioral mental health client, and then we work on that. Or sometimes it's just financial coaching, but very often the people who are having the financial coaching, that's what they're coming in for. Where I'm folding in the behavioral stuff because that's the kind of the pathology that gets them to the financial situations that they get into to
Yeah.
seek a coach like me. And so I tell them that from the beginning so nobody's shocked, like, oh, you're therapying me. And I'm like, you should probably get a therapist because it's going to continue.
And
And
just so
so
you know, I can help you with that too.
I wear different hats at different times on purpose, right?
Right.
And so for those of my clients who get both services, we talk about the financial stuff in a financial setting and the therapy stuff in the therapy setting. And
Yeah.
if the twins shall meet, I'm very clear of like I'm gonna note that for your therapy session, or I'm gonna note that for your coaching session,
Mm.
right? So because I want them to be invested in both parts individually,
Mm.
right?
From a branding standpoint, were you tempted to call yourself a financial therapist?
Absolutely not. No.
I thought maybe I was just thinking, I was like, man, that would be clever because I've never seen that, right? Even though I think it
Yeah.
makes total sense, though, to be honest with you. Let me not change the way you're doing things, but I'm
Yeah.
just that's the way my mind works. Like, hey, I'm the one and only financial therapist. I definitely can help you in different ways no one else can.
Yeah.
That
So
kind of.
financial therapy is an up and coming genre, if you will.
So it
But
exists, huh? Wow.
it does. Yeah, it does. There's not very many. And but those who are financial therapists, they have degrees that I don't.
Mm,
And so I'm not going to step on those toes at all because I wholeheartedly respect people who go in for accounting degrees and bookkeeping things like hard pass. No
yeah.
thanks. Right.
Yeah.
My role as a coach is to do the first few steps in getting someone to be able to manage their money well. And then when they find that they have some excess, I'm going to send them to a friend who has the degrees that they can help them
Yeah.
because that's out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Um, so let's talk real quick again back to starting off your practice there. What are some of the ways that really works for you finding new clients? Especially when you were starting. I know you had a few that came over with you, or found you again and moved over. Besides that, what's really what you found works the best for you?
Um, Networking, which is one of the hardest things that I do as an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
um, because I don't know if you know this, but most therapists are introverts.
Yeah.
Most of us are like, yeah, we don't really want to talk to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One on one, we could talk all day long, but like to go to a networking event, it's a little overwhelming.
I want to
So
ask you. Go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry. I got
the
someone else.
the networking part of this role I've put myself out there in out of the box type things. Like I'm working with financial advisors and funeral home managers and veteran services and churches and family law attorneys, chiropractors, first responders. I mean, I'm working with a gamut of different types of folks because everybody knows somebody who could use a good therapist.
Yeah.
And most people know somebody who needs some financial talking to.
Right. Right. For sure. So networking is your main way of getting new clients and getting your name out there. That's good. What have you what would you recommend for someone who's thinking about starting their own practice? Maybe they were in a similar situation as you, working with another company or whatnot, and now they're like, hey, they got the itch, they want to do it. What's some of the things that maybe you'd give them advice on, or at least considering doing that on their own?
Be patient with yourself because the clients won't come flooding in your door, and that's okay. Use strategy, right? So the strategy of gaining new clients and understanding that it is nobody grows their practice overnight. It is a gradual step by step process. It's a walk before you run, before you do a marathon. And so in my sage wisdom of like 7 months of private practice, I would highly encourage the new practice owner to be patient.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have a plan.
Now, let me ask you, do you meet with most of your clients in person, both therapy and financial coach, or do you do some over Zoom, or you do a little bit of both?
So I'm a hybrid, which makes
Okay.
me sound fancy, but I'm not. It's basically because of COVID that I would ever have entertained doing virtual anything.
Mm,
So before COVID, everybody was in person because that's what was required. And so now, as a mental health therapist, I can see anybody in the state in which I live
mm.
and am licensed.
What about financial coach? Is it limited to?
Financial coaching, all's fair.
Yeah.
Right, I can do a whole world as long as you speak English because I only know a little Japanese and it's enough to get me out of trouble, and that's about it.
And then if you were to write down who you, I don't want to use the word ideal, but your client that you would definitely be able to help the most when it comes to the financial coach side of you, who would that be, or how would you describe that type of client?
Somebody who is over the paycheck to paycheck experience. They're just over it. And they're willing to make a small change because that's what it takes. It's just a small step, just a small shift.
I like that. That sounds like a good promotion or advertisement right there in itself. Are you over the paycheck to paycheck? And if you're willing to make a small change, come see me. I got some solutions for you. That sounds great. I love your story, how you started as in the military, and obviously working with those clients now, and now you've added on, as you saw through your sessions, that the financial aspect of things were a driver, if you will, of the stress and some of the hiccups of life, which obviously is totally true. And then you didn't just say, "Hey, that's a big element, that's a big issue," but you also went to the length of adding that as a solution, and so, and that's great. I mean, it sounds like you're on your way to doing some new great things. You took the shift from, or the leap, I should say, from working in corporate to doing your own thing. So, what would I want to know next is what is next for you for the rest of this year? Maybe what are you looking forward to for next year? What, you got a goal that you don't mind sharing or talking about?
Well, every practitioner wants to fill their practice. And so that's I'm no different. And so ideally, my dream is to have 60% on the therapy side and 40% on the financial coaching side and kind of keep that happy divide going, and then kind of just keep growing my practice. I can, I'll say it lightly, I can tolerate up to 80 clients at a time, and I'm about 70% there. And so just growing my practice and navigating and networking with, with some really cool folks. Like I've gotten to meet, man, just really fantastic people. So
Yeah.
yourself included. Like I appreciate the opportunity to be able to kind of talk with you.
So
Um,
7 months, you're already 70% booked. That's great. 7 months. That means you've been moving the needle, and being an entrepreneur as well as a therapist. You've been working hard, especially if you're by yourself there doing it on your own. Do you have any other support staff, or is it all you?
It's all me. However, I could not stay as sane as I am without my husband. Like, he is
Yeah.
a rock star. He's amazing. He's one of my favorite people. And the other, I mean, I could list like a Grammy, person. Like, I could list tons of people who have helped me, but one of the other really highly encouraging people is my office mate, Dr. Courtney Martin. She's fantastic and she's encouraging. We've been friends for, oh gosh, 8 years. And we've worked together that whole time. And she's a rock star model of a therapist. And I have great respect for her.
Now, when you say office mate, what do you mean? She just shares an office and helps you out, or works with you? Got you.
Yeah, we share an office and we just collaborate like a fellow clinician who has their own practice. We collaborate on just different things, and then we're friends on top of that. So
that's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. So if people want to learn more about you or visit you, if they're in that area, or find you online, what was the best way to do that? I have a website. I wonder if this is the right one. Is this the right one for you?
Yep, jloydtherapycoaching.com.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you can be found on social media as well, maybe Facebook, Instagram, those places. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm not sure what's allowed as far as therapy is concerned, but is there tips or things you can share, maybe a little nuggets that kind of give people more exposure of who you are and what a benefit of being able to see a therapist could do? Is that something that you do or can do? I'm not even sure what they allow.
Yeah. So this is something that I wanted to make sure that I bring up. A lot of times nowadays we find that people are advocating for mental wellness on social media, and I have such an appreciation for that. However, sometimes people take it sideways and they walk around in their environments and say, now I have this blah 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 diagnosis because Dr. TikTok said I do. If you have questions about your mental health and you feel like you're having a hard time navigating that, please seek out mental health therapy.
Right.
At least for an evaluation or some tips. Look into it. It's worth the investment in yourself to navigate your mental health well.
Yes, that's great advice for anyone that may be watching this or see this online. Man, what a joy. You gave me some direction. I put myself out there a little bit and you helped out with that. Fun learning about the combination of what you do and learning more about who you are and your story. I'd like to have you come back on and maybe we'll talk more about the financial side, and even, there's always stuff to talk about with the therapy side as well. But I'd love to have you come back on maybe in the near future, find out where you're at, how you're doing, and love to have you back. I appreciate you coming on today for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Thank you guys for taking a look and watching. Until next time, we'll see you right here on the Be My Guest podcast. You've been watching Be My Guest podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to be a guest on our podcast, go to BeMyGuestPodcast.com. That's BeMyGuestPodcast.com.